Welcome back. Today I want to go over how to liven up your drone footage using shots from Google Earth Studio. We'll cover how to get the latitude and longitude for your drone footage using the SRTs created by DJI drones. I'll cover point-to-point and zoom-to Google Earth Studio shots. So let's get started. To start the process of merging Google Earth Studio footage and your drone footage, you'll need the lat long for your drone footage. To get the lat long, you're going to need an SRT file. SRT file contains camera information as well as the lat long and altitude. To get the SRT files, connect your drone, make sure you're on video, hit the three dots in the upper right-hand corner, go to Camera, and scroll down to Video Subtitles. Turn that on. This will create an SRT file for each video you shoot with your drone. So I've got my SRT files. I've renamed the files based on the location just to make it easier. There's a couple of ways you can go about getting the information out of the SRT files that you need. Start with the simplest. Right-click on the SRT file. Open with Notepad. You get a text file containing camera information as well as the latitude and longitude information we're looking for. The problem with this method is there's no way to determine what you're actually looking at when you get to this latitude and longitude. Let's go to method number 2. I have a program called Subtitle Edit installed. It's a free program. I'll leave a link in the description below. But if I open that in Subtitle Edit, I get this where I have a viewer. Now, one of the things that I don't like about this is the font size is too big and it blocks the view. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to do Control H for a search and replace. And I'm going to search and drop that font size down and replace all. And now the font size drops down where I can actually see it. So now I've got my drone shot and I've got all that information. So I'm going to go ahead and select just the latitude and longitude information and Control C to copy. Then I'm going to go to Google Earth Studio. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. I'm going to hit the green button. This is Blank Project, and I'm going to go to Quick Start, and I'm going to do Zoom to and Start. Now I'm going to paste that latitude and longitude in there and get rid of anything that is not the actual numbers. Put a comma between the latitude and longitude. And there is my file location. So now if I switch back to Subtitle Editor, I get my view. So I'm looking down this row of boats. And now I'm going to use the mouse and the Alt key to position this. Just drag this around until I get that. Now I'll let go of the Alt key and I can drag image. And I'm going to zoom that in. And now I'm going to bounce back and forth between the two to try and get this image lined up pretty close to this image. Now you can do split screen, but I find it easier to leave those at full screen and just bounce back and forth. And I'm using Alt-Tab on a Windows machine to bounce back and forth between the windows. So let's position this. That is pretty good. I want to make this a little bit further out. All right, that's good. And so click the green arrow for next. Gives you a starting altitude, and then hit that again. And that looks pretty good. Well, I like to change the default 5-second clip to a 7-second, and that's just to give me a little bit more footage to work with. Now I can go in and edit this, but for the purpose of this, we're just going to leave it like it is. So let's save this. That's Sassoon Marina Zoom. And now let's click Render. Let's change that to 4K 3840 and submit. Now, if you go to Animation and Cloud Renders, you can track the progress of your render. So let's let that render, and we'll come back and go on to the next step. Once the render is completed, you'll get a download button. Just click it and it'll download to your default download location, and then you can move that into the folder you're using. All right, I've downloaded my render, and I'm going to go into a timeline. You can do this in any editing software. I'm using DaVinci Resolve 18.6. And I'm going to drop that Google Earth shot onto the timeline, and I'm going to drop my drone footage right at the end of that. I'm going to scrub through the drone footage first and just grab the piece of it that I want to use. And we're just doing this for demonstration purposes, so let's get rid of all of that at the end. Now, as I scrub through the Google Earth footage, you'll see that it zooms in. It tilts down, it gets to the resting spot, and then it holds for a few seconds. So what I like to do is get to right at the point where it stops moving, put a cut, and get rid of that. So now I've got my two pieces of footage, and I'm going to add a cross dissolve right between the two, and that's going to help me line these up. To line them up, I'm going to end up trying to zoom one of the pieces of footage. Now, in this case, my drone footage, which you can see kind of ghosted there, is closer in than my Google Earth footage. And so what I'm going to do is go to the very beginning of the clip. I'm going to keyframe the zoom, the X, Y, and the rotation angle. I'm going to go right back there. And then I'm going to start zooming up that Google Earth footage until it's about the same size. I'm going to adjust the X and Y positions. And if I need to, I can adjust the rotation angle to get that to line up. Now you notice this little causeway is here on my Google Earth and is here, but that really won't make that much of a difference when you zoom it together. Your eye's going to be drawn to what's in the center frame there. So let's go back to the beginning, pop that to full screen, and see how that looks. So there's our zoom in, our tilt, and then merge into the drone footage. And that looks okay for what we're doing. You can tweak it if you want it to look a little better than that. All right, let's go ahead and do another one. So in this case, I'm just going to open up Subtitle Editor. Let's go ahead and drop that font size again, and let's scrub through that footage in the Subtitle Editor to find pretty close to where we want it to be when we zoom into it. So I've got the dome building there at City Hall. You can play. Let's do right about there. All right, let's copy that latitude and longitude information. Go back to Google Earth Studio and do a quick start. Zoom to, paste that in there, get rid of anything that is not the latitude and longitude, put a comma between them, and there is my initial starting position. So I've got the dome City Hall building right here. Now using the mouse and the mouse in combination with the Alt key, I can zoom this in using the mouse scroll wheel. And I can position that, get it pretty close to where, so that this area up here kind of looks like that. I'm going to zoom that one in a little bit closer. I think that's good. And now let's go to the starting altitude and run that through. Now, one of the things you'll notice in the default settings, you get to a certain point in the zoom and the point of view flips 180 degrees, and I think that kind of draws you out of the zoom. So one of the things that you can do is stop the play, hit the back button, and then just reposition the Earth, kind of play around with it. And that one is not quite as bad. There you get a flip. It's not just a cut to the 180 degrees out. So let's go ahead and go with that. Make that 7 seconds, give myself a little more footage. Let's change that to 4K, 3840 there, and submit. and then go back and check the cloud renders, and it shows that it's queued. We'll come back in a little bit and see how that render works out. So I've got the render complete. I've got it downloaded and pulled into the editing software, and let's drop that onto the timeline. And again, we're going to go down, follow that down to the point where it stops, and trim off that hold at the end. And let's drop the drone footage on there. Scrub through that drone footage and get the starting point we want. Let's go about there. Cut that. Let's go to the end of the clip and let's cut it about there. All right, so I'm going to go back to the split between the drone and the Google Earth. Put cross dissolve. Now in this case, the Google Earth footage is closer than the drone footage, so I'm going to go to the very end of the clip and I'm going to keyframe zoom, XY position, and rotation angle. Back to the cross dissolve, and let's start bumping the size of that drone footage up until they are about match. Reposition the X and Y. Get that pretty close to lined up. And let's see what that looks like. Zoom in and cross in between the Google Earth footage and the drone footage. That was a zoom. Now let's do something a little different. Let's do a point-to-point Google Earth move. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up the Suisun City Hall SRT. I'm going to fix that font size, and let's get that latitude and longitude setting. And back in Google Earth, we're going to do File, New, and we're going to do point-to-point. First thing I'm going to do is paste that City Hall latitude and longitude in there. Find my starting location using the mouse, the Alt key, and the scroll wheel. Position that to my starting position there. I think that works. And now let's open up this Elizabethan covered bridge. Fix that font size. Let's scrub through this and find a good ending point for our point-to-point. That's good right there. So let's copy that latitude and longitude. Go back to Google Earth and set that as our second point. Let's reposition this, get that lined up the way we want it. Position that bridge about the same location as our footage. Looks pretty good. Let's see what that does. All right, so let's save that, and let's go ahead and render that. We'll come back once that render is finished and pull it into the editing software. I've got my render finished, and it pulled into the editing software, and I've got my City Hall clip first, because that's where we're going to zoom from. You notice that I'm panning in, and I want to start my point-to-point at the end of this clip. Reverse this so it starts out there and ends up there. Now let's go ahead and drop that City Hall to bridge move there. Now I'm going to set keyframes there at the beginning of that clip. I'm going to go to the midpoint between the two, select my drone footage, and I'm going to reposition that to line those up. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be close there. So let's go here, see what that looks like. Cross dissolve there. It's pretty close. Let's see what that looks like. Let's go to the end of that and get to the point right where it stops. Trim off that hold at the end. Let's put that drone footage at the end of that. And we just need a little bit for this demonstration, so let's get rid of all that stuff at the end there. Go to the midpoint, put a cross dissolve. So I'm going to go to the end of the clip, and I'm going to keyframe zoom, X, Y, and rotation. Go back to that midpoint And let's start zooming that up. Reposition the X and Y. And let's see what that looks like. So there's my point to point, comes into the bridge and rolls right there. We've covered setting up your drone to create the SRT files. We've covered getting your latitude and longitude out of the SRT files. We've covered how to make a zoom to and a point-to-point transition merging drone footage and the Google Earth Studio. If you enjoyed this, I'd appreciate a subscription. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.